know that most of what you've seen, read, or heard about Billy the Kid is untrue? My name is Gail Cooper. I'm a medical doctor and forensic psychiatrist. My specialty is murder case consultation for the defense. For 20 years, I've used my expertise to uncover the real Billy the Kid. Researching over 40,000 pages of archival documents and books, I've written the revisionist history. It's shocking, it's liberating, and I've written books demolishing the hoaxes, hijacking the history. My talks will share with you what I've found. Cover-ups, misinformation, and fakery, to use Old West lingo, will bite the dust. This talk presents the real Oliver Pleasant Brushy Bill Roberts, the most enduring Billy the Kid imposter. The information is from my book, Cracking the Billy the Kid Imposter Hoax of Brushy Bill Roberts. This expose of Billy the Kid imposter Oliver Pleasant Roberts, self-named Brushy Bill, shows that he contrasted sharply with real Billy Bonney. An elderly disability recipient, Brushy Bill had been a Hyco, Texas laughingstock for accosting passersby with tales of his fantasized frontier identities while dressed in homemade cowboy outfits. But in 1949, fate lifted him from obscurity in the master plan of car parts and copier machine salesman WilliamVMorrison, himself impersonating an attorney and seeking fame and fortune by backing imposters of famous Old West characters. Brushy Bill's Billy the Kid act caught his eye. By 1950, Brushy Bill both entered the world stage and exited it by sudden death at 71 or 91 in Billy the Kid years. He'd been relentlessly coached by Morrison for his impersonation, but failed Morrison's publicity stunt hearing with New Mexico's governor to get Billy the Kid's 1879 pardon promised by Governor Lew Wallace. Brushy didn't live to see the 1955 book backing him, titled Alias Billy the Kid, by Morrison and a C.L. Sonneshin. By 1950, Brushy Bill had limped through an empty life in the Midwest and Texas, crippled by mental illness, necessitating lifelong caretaking by his family or 4 older wives. To cope, he cocooned himself in grand aspirations, flowering as delusions and fabrications of a different life and family in which he was or was with famous Old West people from 20 years before his birth. He read books to embellish his tall tales and spewed aliases like Texas Kid, Hugo Kid, Rattlesnake Bill, Kid Roberts, and Brushy Bill, his favorite. He also changed his name from Oliver P. for Pleasant Roberts to Oliver L. Roberts to hide his identity. His greatest creation was himself as William Henry Roberts, alias Billy the Kid. But he also claimed to be Frank James, Jesse James's brother, a Roosevelt Rough Rider, a Buffalo Bill Cody and Pawnee Bill Wild West performer, an operator of his own Wild West show, a Pinkerton detective, a famous bronco rider, a friend of Belle Starr, a deputy U.S. Marshal, a rancher in Mexico, and an associate of Pancho Villa. Though these personas involve travels to Mexico, Argentina, and the Shetland Islands, historian Donald Klein, in his 1988 unpublished book, Brushy Bill Roberts, I Wasn't Billy the Kid, used family interviews to confirm that he actually stayed in the same locales with or near his family members his whole life. Klein added that his family had heard his tall tales many times. Though Brushy's ignorance of actual history doomed his Billy the Kid facsimile, his coup de grace came from his own kin, whose knowledge of his real identity and antics had always hung over his shenanigans like the sword of Damocles. On December 16, 1987, his niece, Geneva Roberts Pittman, decided to stop his burgeoning hoax. She wrote to Joe Boland, co-founder with his wife Marilyn of the Billy the Kid Outlaw Gang, citing the genealogy page of the Roberts family Bible. Born in 1918, she knew Brushy Bill all her life. Her parents, his full brother Tom Roberts, and his wife, his frequent caretakers, housed him when she was a child. She later cared for him herself. She concluded, "My uncle was not Billy the Kid." She also contradicted his fake genealogy. Excerpted, she wrote, "Dear Sir, the reason you are not finding my family is you don't have the right name. My grandfather was H.O. Roberts, married to Sarah Elizabeth Ferguson on May 14, 1876. Oliver P. Roberts was Brushy Bill's name. I don't know what the P was for. He was born August 26, 1879. I have the family Bible record. I would also like for this to be settled, as I know my Uncle Oliver was not Billy the Kid." Geneva Pittman also wrote to Donald Klein on April 27, 1988, stating, "I don't know of any job Brushy ever had except for farm work, and that was when he was not on welfare." Being clumsy, he got injuries with scars as a farm laborer, which he claimed as Old West bullet or knife wounds to credulous listeners. On February 2, 1988, Pittman gave Klein a letter from her sister Cordelia, another of Tom Roberts' daughters, showing family caretaking when Brushy's second wife, Molly Brown, died. Cordelia wrote, "Oliver came to Arkinda, Arkansas, and lived with us until I got ready to go back to Oklahoma in September 1918, so Oliver decided to go with me. I don't know just how long Oliver stayed in Oklahoma then, but Tom, his brother and her father, and the family moved back to Canton, Texas, and Grandpa and Grandma, Brushy's parents, Henry Oliver Roberts and Sarah Elizabeth Ferguson, stayed in Arkansas. I think Oliver went back to Arkinda and stayed with them until Grandpa got almost down, so Tom, his brother, went and moved them back to Texas with them. Grandpa, H.O. Roberts, didn't live long after they got back there. He died March 31st, 1924, and Grandma, Sarah Elizabeth Ferguson, only lived a year or so. She actually died August 29, 1924. I don't know what became of Oliver after that, but he must have gone back to Oklahoma, as he was there when the boys had typhoid. I was married by then, and BV was about a year old, so Oliver was so much trouble to Mother and Dad, his brother Tom, that Mother asked me if I would take and keep him, so we did. He stayed with us most of the summer of 1925. On January 28, 1988, Mary June Roberts, another of Geneva Pittman's sisters, aware of Brushy Bill's fabricated family, gave Klein information about disabled Brushy's dependents. She stated, "The first Oliver stayed with us was 1922 or 23. He stayed again in 1925. He stayed a few days in 1942. I guess he visited with Mother and Dad, his brother Tom, and his wife. Also, Raymond, Ruby's second son, was staying with Joan and Jim also. He said Uncle Oliver was always telling tall tales. Grandpa Roberts, that's H.O. Roberts, Brushy's father, never fought in any war." Brushy made up a Civil War Confederate fighting father. "Grandma," that's Sarah Elizabeth Ferguson, "was his second wife and Oliver's mother. Oliver never had a stepmother," which Brushy had made up. "I hope this has given enough ammunition to put the entire mess to rest." For his Billy the Kid impersonation, Brushy Bill created a 20-year time-regressed family to hide that he was an infant at Billy Bonney's July 14, 1881 killing. To match Billy, he pretended William Henry was his name and an Aunt Bonnie was a relative, unaware that William Henry Bonney was Henry McCarty's alias, invented in 1877. Brushy also lifted some names from his actual family, like calling his mother, Sarah Elizabeth Ferguson, his stepmother. In 2015, his family member, Roy L. Hawes, to whom Brushy was a half-great-grand-uncle, wrote a book titled Brushy Bill, Proof That His Claim to be Billy the Kid was a Hoax. Hawes provided Brushy's real family tree. It showed that the Roberts family had two branches from Brushy's father, Henry Oliver H.O. Roberts' two marriages, with Brushy from the second. Hawes descended from Henry Oliver's first marriage. Importantly, Hawes revealed that his own mother, Eulaine Hawes, in the 1980s was duped into vouching for a fake Brushy Bill genealogy by a William Tunstall, still used by Brushy backers. Roy L. Hawes stated that Brushy Bill's paternal grandfather was Joseph Roberts, 1797 to 1857. His kindly dirt farmer father, Henry Oliver H.O. Roberts, was born on May 18, 1852, in Rusk County, Texas, and was not the abusive father, John Henry Wild Henry Roberts, Brushy fabricated. Henry Oliver died on March 31, 1924, in Van Zandt County, Texas. I used Roy L. Hawes' information to construct relevant family trees. On screen is the family tree for the first marriage of Brushy's father, Henry Oliver H.O. Roberts, himself the child of Joseph Roberts and Rachel Henson. It was to Carolyn Dunn, who died in 1874. Their two children were Samantha Bell in 1871 and Martha Vada in 1872. Martha Vada, who debunked Brushy, married Monroe Dudley Heath, yielding Vada Bell Heath. Vada Bell had two marriages. The first was to a D.L. Goff, yielding Eulaine Fay Goff, who married Leonard Hawes, with Roy L. Hawes, Brushy's debunking author, being the youngest of their three sons. Vada Bell's second marriage was to Joseph Emerson, producing Paul Emerson, who also debunked Brushy. Key is Royale Hawes's mother, Elaine Fay Goff Hawes, who was tricked by William A. Tunstall into claiming that her Carolyn Dunn branch was a different family, having an Oliver L. Brushy Bill Roberts, who was not Oliver P. for Pleasant Roberts. Royale Hawes explained that Brushy had created the Oliver L. name for a Social Security application, fraudulently adding 10 years to his age to qualify for those 65 or older newly offered in Texas in 1936. Hawes stated that his half-uncle Paul Emerson from Vada Bell's second marriage, when a teenager in 1946, met Brushy, who was visiting Martha Vada Heath, Paul's grandmother and Brushy's half-sister from his father's first marriage to Carolyn Dunn. And Martha Vada told Paul Emerson that Brushy was not Billy the Kid. On screen is the family tree for the second marriage of Henry Oliver Roberts, which yielded Brushy Bill. In Arkansas, it was on May 17, 1876, to Sarah Elizabeth Ferguson, 1856 to 1924. Their 8 children were Andrew Barry in 1877, Mary C. in 1878, Oliver Pleasant, who became Brushy Bill, born August 26, 1879, John W. in 1881, Lonnie V. in 1884, Thomas Tom Ulsey in 1885, Brushy's caretaker and father of Geneva Pittman, Cordelia Roberts, and Mary June Roberts, who debunked Brushy, Nora in 1892, and Joseph Irvin in 1895. Hawes also recorded that Brushy's 4 caretaking wives were Anna Lee, married 1909, divorced 1910, Molly Brown, married 1912, died 1919, Letitia Ballard, married 1929, died 1944, and Melinda E. Allison, married 1945, and died 1952. Brushy was married to Melinda when he died in 1950. His possessions went to her son, then to his son Bill Allison, Brushy Bill's step-grandson, who was duped into playing a part in the Brushy Bill hoax. Brushy Bill's 20-year aging to impersonate Billy the Kid by 1936 already had 10 years added for his Social Security benefits fraud. Donald Klein found that he faked other ages. Klein wrote, in 1941, he told the Heiko editor of the Heiko News Review he was born in 1867. In 1949, he was wire recorded in Merrimack Canyons, Missouri, as stating he was 85, but a year later, in the meeting with the governor of New Mexico for the Billy the Kid pardon, he had somehow reached 91. He told his last wife he was born on December 31, 1868. Note that this was the date for his Social Security fraud, and this was placed on his death certificate and headstone. Close quote. For his Billy the Kid impersonation, Brushy made his birth date December 31st, 1859, and his backers later replaced his original headstone with one having that fake date. Donald Klein spelled out Brushy Bill's real timeline. Family interviews revealed that all his life he lived with his caretaking relatives or wives in Arkansas, Oklahoma, or Texas, working as a farm laborer, then being on disability as he descended into increasingly elaborate delusions of fictional famous personas. Brushy Bill was born in Bates, Sebastian County, Arkansas, on August 26, 1879, as Oliver Pleasant Roberts. On Billy Bonney's July 14, 1881 death day, he was 1 year, 10 months, and 19 days old. In 1900, at 21, he was still living with his parents, who'd moved with him to Sulphur Springs, Texas. He gave the census taker his birth date as August of 1879 and parents as H.O. and Sarah Elizabeth, and occupation as farm laborer. In 1904, his parents moved to a farm in Van Zandt County, Canton, Texas. From there, he traveled with his brother Tom's family to Dibble, Oklahoma, to visit Cordelia, Tom's daughter, and his niece. He ended up working there for an uncle. In 1906, he returned to Canton to his parents, and on the way there saw Buffalo Gap, his future fake birthplace, as Billy the Kid, for the first time. When his parents moved that year, he stayed in Canton doing farm labor. In 1909, at 30, he married Anna Lee in Canton. In the 1910 census, as a farm laborer, he now made up a Texas birth and parents from Kentucky, but kept his birth date of August 1879. Changing his history may have marked his unrecognized delusions. That year, he divorced Anna Lee. In 1912, still in Canton, he married Molly Brown. They moved to Horatio, Arkansas, where he was a farm laborer. His brother Tom, with family, including daughter Geneva, future Pittman, moved to nearby Arkinda, Arkansas. In 1915, at 36, Brushy Bill displayed his first recognized delusion. Jesse James's brother Frank had died. He claimed to be him, though Frank James was 36 years older. Klein wrote, "The Roberts family believes that Brushy apparently had seen Frank James at one time and become obsessed with him, as he would later with Billy the Kid and others." In 1903, Frank James toured the country with Cole Younger in their James Younger show. Frank retired to the family homestead and by 1912 was selling tours of the James home for a fee until his death in 1915. The family feels Brushy may have made the tour or witnessed the show. In 1918, Brushy bought a little farm in Sevier County, Texas, selling it in 6 months for a small profit. He and Molly moved to Polk County's Mena, Texas, where she died of the flu. So he went to Arkinda to live with his brother Tom. But Tom was repulsed by his Frank James impersonation. So when Tom moved back to Canton, he sent Brushy to live with his daughter Cordelia in Dibble, Oklahoma. Between 1919 and 1921, Brushy lived in Oklahoma or Arkansas with Cordelia or his parents. In 1922, he attempted to return to his brother Tom in Canton, but was rejected again. So he moved in with Tom's daughter, Geneva Pittman, in Canton from 1922 to 1923 and worked as a farmhand. With Geneva, he added a new persona, claiming to have been a rodeo rider in Madison Square Garden. In 1924, parents Henry Oliver and Sarah Elizabeth were ailing, so Tom brought them to Canton, where Henry Oliver died on March 31st and Sarah Elizabeth died on August 29th. In 1925, Brushy Bill worked for a non-family as a farm laborer, but returned to live with Geneva Pittman in Canton from 1925 to 1927. In 1929, he married Letitia Ballard and left Canton to escape townspeople's ridicule for his tall tales. moving to Comanche, where he worked in a turkey processing plant, his last job. In 1930, he told a Bob Young in Comanche that he was a friend of outlaw James McDaniels, indicating expanding delusions, which he and WilliamVMorrison would later use for his life after the Billy the Kid shooting. In 1931, he again moved to escape ridicule for his tall tales, ending up in Gladewater, Texas. There, he convinced a DeWitt Travis and a Robert E. Lee that he was Billy the Kid, thus dating that delusion's start to the 1930s. In 1936, he applied for Social Security by altering his name to Oliver L. Roberts and his birth date to December 31st, 1868. In 1944, his wife Letitia Ballard died. In 1945, he married Melinda E. Allison, living in Hamilton, then Hyco, Texas. In 1948, WilliamVMorrison got wind of his Billy the Kid claim. In 1949, Brushy Bill went to a convention in Merrimack Caverns, Missouri, and vouched for his friend, J. Frank Dalton, as being Jesse James, surviving his April 3, 1882 murder. Then 70, Brushy gave his age as 85. That year he told Morrison, who came to meet him, that he was 90 and was Billy the Kid. His coaching by Morrison began that year. In 1950, for a Morrison gambit, in January, Brushy Bill unsuccessfully backed J. Frank Dalton as being Jesse James. Morrison continued to coach him for his Billy the Kid impersonation. On November 30th, he failed his Billy the Kid pardon quest with New Mexico Governor Thomas Jewett Mabry and was called an imposter. On December 27th, 1950, Brushy Bill died of a sudden heart attack. That day, he was 71 years, 4 months, and 2 days old. It's possible to see Brushy Bill's other impersonations and fabricated families. The July 25th, 1941, the Hyco News Review ran, "Brushy Bill has come to Hyco to spend the rest of his life." For it, he pretended to be a 73-year-old expert rider, a Buffalo Bill Wild West show performer, a rancher in Old Mexico, and a 40-year lawman. He called his made-up father Al Roberts. The excerpted article stated, "Brushy Bill, arrayed in typical Western regalia, 10-gallon hat, blue dungarees, boots and all, arrived in Hyco the first of the week to make his home here for the rest of his days. Known formally as O.L. Roberts," note that's his made-up L, "Brushy Bill and his wife came here from Gladewater, where they have lived since 1931 and have made their home in East Texas for 40 years. Son of Al Roberts, known in the early days as Two-Gun Henry," note that for the Billy the Kid impersonation, he called his father John Henry J.H. Wild Henry Roberts. "Brushy Bill admits to being 73 years old." Note that he was 62, but 73 was to match his Social Security benefits fraud birth date of 1868. He was on a Mexican ranch in 1914, but the Mexican Revolution broke things up. In 1899, he represented Texas in the Cheyenne Roundup as a horse rider. In 1893, on his riding skill, he was awarded a trip to South America to break out wild cattle. He also claims to have ridden with Bill Cody in Wild West shows. Roberts was born in Buffalo Gap in Taylor County. Note that he retained Buffalo Gap for his Billy the Kid impersonation, and came with his father to a ranch in this section near the Comanche County line. He knew Heiko in the early days. I was an officer of the law first and last for 40 years, I was, he tells his listeners, adding that he was a state ranger in 91 and 92, stationed along the Mexican border. In 86, 87, and 88, he reports having done scout duty in the Black Hills of the Dakotas. He says he wants to mount the platform at the Heiko reunion and see if he can locate some of his relatives or early friends. Later, others witnessed Brushy Bill's Billy the Kid impersonation. Alitra Crane Weathers, graduating high school in 1952, recounted her childhood memories of, quote, crazy Brushy Bill in her March of 1998 Gazetteer of Hamilton County, Texas, blog as Brushy Bill or Billy the Kid, Oliver L. Roberts. Weathers wrote, I don't know anything about the validity of Brushy Bill's claims to his being Billy the Kid. I do remember that he was a wiry little man whom I thought was crazy. Mother and I would do everything we could to avoid being trapped by Brushy Bill as we knew him. In retrospect, I would classify his behavior as a form of dementia. Roberts would trap people between himself and one of the light posts around the square. Once someone was trapped, Brushy Bill would begin his tirade about his being Billy the Kid, displaying his small wrists and explaining how he once slipped out of a pair of handcuffs to escape. His shirts were always constructed by him or his wife of brightly colored and patterned fabric. The diminutive mustached Mr. Roberts always wore a western hat and tied a red kerchief round his neck. A 1950 Heiko street performance by Brushy Bill had him spouting a connection to Sam Bass while ominously contradicting claims he was supposed to make in 2 months while impersonating Billy the Kid for Governor T.J. Mabry's pardon hearing. The September 18th Dallas Morning News article by a Thomas Turner was titled, Sam Bass Pistol, Texan New Bad Man, Saw Horse Thieves Hang. Ignoring being Billy the Kid, Brushy said that at 21 he was in Dakota's Black Hills and Mexico. His fictional father was now James Henry Roberts, a scout with Kit Carson, who tried to warn Custer about the 5 Indian tribes against him. Note that Brushy Bill's family member and debunker, Roy L. Hawes, recorded that Kit Carson died in 1868 and the Battle of Little Bighorn was in 1876, and there were 6 tribes. Brushy also had Belle Starr's daughter trade him Sam Bass's Colt 45, which Belle Starr got from, quote, Frank Jackson, who grabbed it when Sam was shot by Rangers at Round Rock. In fact, Sam Bass, a train and stagecoach robber and murderer, was shot by Texas Rangers on July 19, 1878, in Round Rock, Texas, but he escaped with Frank Jackson, so no gun was given there. Brushy got the name Jackson from a source he also used for his fake family, likely because the author's name was Roberts. It was Dan W. Roberts' 1914 book about Texas Rangers titled Rangers and Sovereignty. The article stated, Brushy Bill Roberts, one-time associate of Belle Starr, Jesse James, and Buffalo Bill, likes to toss a heavy Colt 45 Thumbbuster pistol to his visitors while he talks. Brushy Bill is Heiko's best-known character. He says he's 90. He looks 20 years younger. While you fondle the 45 Colt, Brushy Bill spins a fascinating yarn of his life. That's one of Sam Bass's pistols. Frank Jackson grabbed it when Sam was shot by the Rangers in Round Rock. He traded it to Belle Starr. She left it to her daughter Pearl Starr. I traded her a 44 for it. Bill is part Cherokee Indian, he vows. His mother was half Cherokee and his father 1/4 Cherokee. In his buckskin jacket, bright shirt, boots, and big hat, he looks every inch the former range rider who was once a featured attraction of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. Brushy Bill, his real name, which he disdains, is Oliver L., is the man who appeared on a New York radio show last January to back up the claim of an elderly Missourian, Frank Dalton, that he is Jesse James. Sure, it's Jesse, he snaps. I knowed him off and on for most of his life. Last time I ever seen him, I was about 10. He come to our house wounded. He had a bullet hole in his shoulder you could see through. I watched my mother wrap a rag round a stick and swab out the hole. Note the crude grammar. Brushy also used it in his Billy the Kid impersonation, as yet another mismatch with Articulate Billy. Brushy Bill lives out his days in an unpainted house on the outskirts of town with his fourth wife. To anyone who will listen, he eagerly relates a fabulous career. Says Brushy, I was born in Buffalo Gap in Taylor County the last hour of 1859. Note that 1859 was for his Billy the Kid impersonation. My granddad, Ben Roberts, was with General Sam Houston in the Mexican War. My dad, J.H. Robert, everybody called him Wild Henry, come from Kentucky in 1850. He was a scout with Kit Carson. Him and Carson tried to warn General Custer he couldn't lick them 5 tribes of Indians, but he wouldn't listen. We come to this county when I was about 7. Dad taught me to ride horses. I could ride anything you could throw a rope on. Boy, like I got mad at him, left home when I was 15, never saw him again. I headed for the Indian Territory, Oklahoma now. Near a town called Briartown, I met Belle Starr. Bill spent several months at Belle Starr's place, he says. Once he became a member of a gang of horse thieves, unknowingly, but he scooted quick. In fact, for many years, he made a good, if precarious, living chasing down horse thieves. He was wounded 26 times and lost 30 horses in scrapes with thieves, he says proudly. He saw many a horse thief at the end of a rope. He wandered through Texas, Oklahoma, New Mexico, and Kansas when still a teenage kid, but he could handle a 6-gun, ride anything with 4 legs, and handle his fists, he says. When he was 21, he was a guard for a stagecoach in the Dakota Black Hills. He weathered 4 hold-up attempts. For 7 years, he recalls, he ranched in Mexico. I joined the Old Texas Anti-Horse Thieves Association. In 1885, I joined Buffalo Bill's show at Pueblo, Colorado for about a year. Then I went with Pawnee Bill's show. I come back to Texas and organized my own show. For 25 years, toured all over the Southwest with it. Bill settled down in Gladewater during the oil boom. Then he left there and came back to Hamilton and Comanche counties. The folks in Hyco are used to his stories and don't pay them much attention anymore. But when a stranger comes by, Bill's eyes light up, and once again he lives the days of Belle Starr. The specifics of Brushy Bill Roberts' mental pathology can only be surmised, but its severity is obvious from his lifelong need for family caretaking. His long-winded tall tales match confabulation, a disorder in which absent experience is filled in by over-elaborated fables. It appears in diseases of memory, like dementias, and also in psychosis, like claiming to be Napoleon. Would Brushy Bill know he was lying? His benefits fraud proves sociopathic capacity for deceit, but being Billy the Kid was delusional. That's implied by family reports to Donald Klein that he feared signing his Social Security checks would get him arrested as Billy the Kid, though Klein confirmed that he did sign them. So Brushy may have had a schizophrenic or bipolar disorder with psychosis, and he collected similarly disturbed delusional friends like Jesse James' imposter J. Frank Dalton. Brushy's family member, Royale Hawes, found another one. Brushy wrote an April 1st, 1949 letter to a Kit Carson impersonator named Orrin Artius Woodman, who called himself Uncle Kit Carson, father of Billy the Kid. They seemed to have a folie à deux, two people sharing a delusion. Brushy wrote as, quote, your son, O.L. Roberts, implying both thought he was Billy the Kid. Hawes felt that Brushy also copied Woodman's fakery, including changing his birth date, using Kit Carson as his fake father, J.H. Roberts' friend, claiming employment by John Chisholm, being a Rough Rider, being in Buffalo Bill's and Pawnee Bill's Wild West shows, and being a deputy U.S. Marshal. But what made Brushy Bill Roberts want to be Billy the Kid? When was dated by Donald Klein to the 1930s, when Brushy and his wife Letitia were in Gladewater, Texas, as evidenced by his first believers being local oil man DeWitt Travis and a Robert E. Lee, both later used by WilliamVMorrison for fake affidavits attesting to Brushy as Billy. Royale Hawes wrote that when Brushy moved to Hyco, Texas in 1949, contrary to his later promoter's claim, he was not secretive about his Billy the Kid persona, and Klein stated that his fourth wife, Melinda E. Allison, knew about it too. As to why Brushy Bill chose the Billy the Kid persona, I believe it was just one among many, as evidenced by his Sam Bass tales just before his Morrison-orchestrated pardon hearing as Billy. I believe the emphasis was Morrison's, who met him in 1949 and to late 1950 relentlessly coached him by books, documents, the tintype, practice tape recordings, and visits to historic sites for the publicity-grabbing pardon and future book and movie deals. One can surmise that Morrison overtaxed this fragile man with information beyond his remembering, and by exposure to public ridicule beyond his tolerance, when he abysmally failed the pardon bid amidst jeering press. He'd fled past homes to escape mocking and had fled into other personas. Universal mocking was inescapable. Suddenly he was trapped as Billy the Kid, possibly decompensating into paranoid panic of being hanged as that outlaw, possibly accounting for his bizarre blurting in the pardon hearing that as Billy the Kid he killed no one, though the sought pardon was for the killings. I believe the stress precipitated his sudden fatal heart attack at 71 years, 4 months, and 2 days, just 28 days after his pardon impersonation catastrophe. One can also guess what Brushy Bill would make of the dupe tourism he has generated in Texas's Canton, Hyco, and Hamilton, where his pilgrims come to visit Billy the Kid, and where his fake tombstone erected by his believers in Hamilton has that impersonation's birth date of December 31st, 1859. Given his penchant for hysterical outpourings, I imagine him sobbing with joy. The point is that Brushy Bill was pathetic, and the parade he spawned of charlatans, impostors, hucksters, forgers, wannabes, and windbags, though reprehensible, are pathetic also, like him, spouting sound and fury, signifying nothing. The next talks introduce, analyze, and expose the men responsible for presenting Brushy Bill Roberts to the world as Billy the Kid, William Vincent Morrison, and Charles Leland Sonneshin.